Thank you for joining us this evening, and welcome to United Policyholders Hurricane Ian webinar on navigating your contents claim. If you'd like to follow along, today's slide deck is here under events on our website, so please download that if you need for reference. A little bit about United Policyholders. We're a national nonprofit. We've been serving as a trusted information resource for insurance consumers in all 50 states since 1991. In Florida, we responded after Hurricane Andrew, and we've been partnering with agencies and partners in the agency in the state since 1992. So this is a part of our Roadmap to Recovery program, which is really just focused on post-disaster guidance and services that are looking at the financial, insurance, real estate, and construction decision-making in that recovery. A little bit about us. We're funded exclusively by donations and grants. You can't hire us. Our services are free, but limited, and we do not take money from insurance companies. If you have not received a copy of our little yellow book, please email and we will mail a copy to you. We've also got this information. These books are available through several of the case management agencies, and I'll have that information on where you can connect to case management at the end of the presentation. And this is our Hurricane Ian Disaster Help Library. So it's got Florida-specific guidance. We've got links to pro-consumer professional help, samples and examples, information about upcoming webinars and resources available to you. And speaking of those samples and examples, this is where you find them on our website, and they're really useful for using the wording to create your own letter requesting information from your insurance company. It also gives you examples of documents that you might see, be it a cost estimate, inventories, for example, like we're talking about today, that proof of loss form for a flood claim, all of that information so you can see what they should look like. And before we get moving, just want to hit a few aphorisms that we at United Policyholders believe help you in the insurance claims process. First and foremost, thinking of your insurance claim as a business transaction. Obviously, the insurance company as a company wants to minimize the money it pays out on your claim. You want to maximize that money paid out to you. And while that adjuster may be friendly, they're not your friend. They are a trained negotiator, and they're there to do their job. And so it falls on you to do your job. And when interacting with your insurance company, the approach we find that most likely to get you what you need is being politely assertive. And of course, speaking up. So presenting your request clearly and in writing, explain what you need, when, and why you're entitled to it. Keeping that claim journal, taking notes of who you talked to, what number you called, the date, the time, what was said, keeping your paperwork organized and together. If you're talking to your adjuster on the phone and they don't email you, you're within bounds to type up an email thanking them for the call, explaining what you understand was said, and asking them to correct it if you need to. And then the biggest thing is having that working copy of your policy, because you're going to refer to that a lot, because that question of when they tell you that you need to do something or your policy says something, you need to be asking, can you show me where it says that in my policy? You need to know, because if it's not in your policy, it's something they're requesting, but it doesn't mean that it's part of the terms of agreement. And joining me today, we have Selena Clark, no, Annie Barber, sorry about that. Selena Clark, who is our Roadmap to Recovery insurance specialist with United Policyholders, and Mark Dillman, who is a partner and public adjuster with Dillman & Dillman, LLC in Connecticut. Thank you for joining us both.
Thanks for having us.
All right, and these are our topics for today. So we're going to go through knowing your limits for personal property, options for completing your claim, how to document and value your personal property, learning the lingo because it is very complicated and technical, talking about why depreciation matters. Selena, I know you're going to have a lot to add here, and then how to protect yourself here. So Mark, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to you and just tell me to move the slides as we go.
Sure, will do. Val, thank you so much for having me on. I just want to say, it's so refreshing to be back, hitting the slide deck with you and United policyholders, and for everything that this organization does is fantastic. And it's always weird saying a word like that, fantastic, to a group of folks who are going through something tremendously life altering. So it's a shame that for anyone watching this, that this is the way we're introduced. I'm wishing you the best through this process, but know that United Policyholders is there and such a valuable organization in what they're doing. And something that's important going through anyone in this loss here before we get into the actual policy, Val will reinforce this, and Celine, I'm sure that the same, is we're a certain amount of days in here, and we're going to talk about rely on others for what they're doing, but just remember that don't use it as a yardstick to where you are. People are at different parts of this process regardless of how far in we actually are, and that's okay. So as we go through this, know this isn't for a particular time in the process. This is going to, capture folks who are just starting their content process and people who are just finishing it, and that's okay. Val had previously mentioned something, and that's one of the most important aspects in terms of substance, and that's have that policy. If you don't have a copy of it now, request it, get a certified policy, get an actual working copy with your declaration page, with the body of the actual policy, and with all endorsements. Oftentimes what we'll see, folks get a policy jacket or a renewal packet for your policy. Go to your agent, go to your carrier, make sure you actually have that full copy of your policy so you're able to actually answer these questions. What are your sublimits? Do you have riders or schedules? What are your duties that you actually need to adhere to get paid? And these are things that we'll go through in a little bit more in depth as this presentation unfolds. But the only way for you to actually answer that question yourself, if there's not responsiveness from your adjuster, is to have that policy. And again, even when you ask your adjuster, where in the policy does it say that? United Policyholders, trust but verify. That's one of the mantras. Anticipate that they're going to do the right thing, but be prepared in case not all the information is conveyed to you in a way that makes sense to you. We're not all insurance experts. When you have that insurance policy, highlight a working copy. Make notes. I have on my desk, I have a ton. I have Post-it notes. I have tabs. I have markers. Everyone does it differently. Highlight a working copy that works for you. We'll see as we go through the contents portion as well, and this will be a recurring theme. Save and scan all receipts for your personal property that you replace. We're talking about the policy as a whole, but we are talking specifically here today about contents. Keep all receipts of items that you're purchasing, personal property, anything that if you turned your house upside down and shook it would have otherwise fallen out, and keep a record and timeline of all communications as we go through this process. Again, network with others, see what has worked for them, but know that that's not the only way it can be done, but that is an absolute good starting point in moving your process forward. But again, it all starts with the policy. So next slide, please. So we talk about the actual goal here, and that's to collect the full amount that your insurer owes you for every item that was actually damaged. There are multiple ways to do this. Val mentioned earlier, this is a contract. You are exchanging payments every month, your premium, in exchange for this promise that they are going to replace these items, right? This is a business transaction, but just like it's a business transaction, you have this policy, things can be negotiated. It doesn't have to be the way it's written on paper at last resort. That's, oftentimes how it does go. It sets out a roadmap. But the insurance carrier on the other side, is a person, they are a business. You might be able to negotiate a waiver of the inventory. It doesn't hurt to ask. We always say the worst thing they're going to say is no. How often have we seen those? Again, I was in California for a little while. I'm in Connecticut.
Mark, I think you froze. All right, we'll get him when he cuts back in. So just on the slide. So while we're waiting for Mark to come back. So that goal of negotiating the waiver, and I know Mark has a story about when he was in California, so we'll get back to that when he comes back in. Preparing that detailed, option B is preparing that detailed list, that inventory that describes and values everything lost and submitting it to your insurance company along with those receipts as you replace items, or hiring professional help to create that inventory for you. And we'll get Mark back in a minute. And so one of the beginning points is, of course, knowing your personal limits. A personal property typically is called coverage C in a policy. And just to be clear, coverage C, it's basically your belongings. It's what you would take with you if you moved, or what would fall out if you could literally take your home, turn it upside down and shake it, right? So when you're thinking about, think about your closet, you know, if it's a built-in, it's not going to move, but it's the things that are on those shelves. And you're going to find your contents limit on your declarations page. And so you're going to check the dollar amount you're going to check for dollar amounts, those limits. And it's usually a percentage of your dwelling coverage. So with this one, it's about 75%, I believe. And when you're looking at your policy, you're also looking for, as Mark mentioned earlier, any endorsements or extras that might modify the amount of your contents coverage. And so you're also going to be checking for those sublimits that we talked about earlier. And those are usually on personal property items such as firearms, jewelry, watches, computers. And we'll show a specific example about that in a minute. And then scheduled items that add value. So, you know, think artwork, jewelry, valuables, right? And let's go to our next slide. So again, you're starting on your declarations page. You want to find it. Selena, correct me if I'm wrong, but State Farm is called Coverage B.
That is correct, Val.
Yes, and I don't know if they're the only carrier that has that. I know we say a few others, but I don't know of anyone besides State Farm who has it as a different coverage.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Right, and so these are the things that we've talked about. You also want to double check your limits based on the type of peril. And be aware that there is a difference if your home was a primary home versus a secondary home. So if it was your secondary home, that coverage limit might be less, might be 50%. And so just be aware and read your policy. And then requirements versus requests. So you want to locate the policy language, like Mark was talking about earlier, that states what your duties and responsibilities are for documenting your loss of your personal property or contents. And then, of course, compare that language with what the adjuster is asking you to provide. They might be asking for extra requested information. And so if you don't believe it's going to assist your claim to provide this extra information, just ask them to show you where it is in your policy. And Selena, just to clarify on this, if you don't mind talking about, some of the information that might be provided that's not in the policy, but there's a reason for it, right? Like age and condition, it's because of the software that they might be using that they need to put that information into. And if you don't, it's going to basically cause you to have a 0 on those responses that you didn't answer that. So could you talk a little bit about what that might look like, some of those requests and why they may or may not matter?
So the request, when they tell you that you need to send in your list, then they expect either a lot of the insurance companies want a policyholder to use the exact contents. They call it contents collaboration, and they'll send you a link and you got to set up an account. And what we find is it is so it's unfriendly. And so many policyholders would say that. So they would want the personal property contents worksheet sent to them, which is set up like Excel. Now, you can fill that out, but when it's sent in, you want to make sure that you have all your ages and you have all of the conditions listed, because if you don't, the desk adjuster is either going to mark it as a 0 and that they need more information, or they are going to send you, they should send you what we call as an RFI letter, which is a request for information, and they're going to tell you what they need. Because age and condition both go into the calculation to for the depreciation. So that's very important. And what I would tell people also is on the ages, especially with antiques, if you had any antiques and you think it's 80 years old, you have no idea when you got that from, or when your mom or maybe your grandmother got it down the line. So it could be 120 years old. So realize that depreciation, the older it is, the more depreciation it's going to hold back, because they really don't take condition into account in that calculation. So do yourself a favor. If you think it could be 100 years old, it is 100 years old.
Right, because the antique would not be depreciable, but that 80-year-old might be, depending on.
Exactly.
So being very clear of what
Exactly.
the requirement is, yeah. You know, and
Right.
and one of the big things is, you know, check with your Department of Insurance to understand the laws and the guidance that apply to your claims. You need to be very, and we'll touch on those slides at the back end of the presentation, so that you've got those for reference. Because what you want to do, of course, is to receive the full amount you're owed under the policy. So you want to be working, as Selena said, you're working on with the same goal in mind as your adjuster, and you're just trying to come to this convergence to accomplish this. And sorry, there we go. My clicker's not working. So going back to knowing your limits. So on this example, you know, you can see personal property C. This is the one we started with at the beginning. It's a percentage of. When we look at this other example, it's again personal property C, but it's, you know, knowing where it is, because it's going to vary on the forms you've got. Here's a foremost example. And here's a State Farm example. So you can see the difference. It's called B. And so we want to show you these examples so you can see where your coverage will be. Because I will say, when I first looked at my insurance policy, it was all Greek to me. And then I had these letters trying to tell me what was what. And it doesn't flow very easily to read and understand.
Right. And Val, if I can say something on this. Oh, can you go back just one slide, please?
Absolutely. Yes.
So down there, as you're looking at your screen on the bottom left corner, where you see like jewelry and furs, that's option, they call that option JF. That is something that acronyms are used so much, and it's a shame that they do that with policyholders as well. So just realize, if somebody says option JF, that's where you're going to find it. That's your jewelry and furs. And then firearms would be like option FA. And then they also have one, it's called HC, which is home computers. Usually that's another $5,000 to $10,000 extra. So these are extra amounts once you hit your policy limit.
Exactly. And then on the other side, we have the special sublimits, right? And so this is where some of those categories, like Selena was just talking about, you know, they may limit what you're going to receive for these. And so typical, you know, some common limits on your contents of personal property. Money is usually very limited. It could be anywhere from $150 to $500. They don't care if you had $5,000 in a safe. If it's destroyed, it's destroyed. Business property is usually very limited. If you had a trailer, computers, electronics, cameras, you know, you need to be aware of what those limits are, because if you had more than your limit, they only owe you the limit for those special sublimits. However, some items such as jewelry and firearms, they might have limits that don't apply to general disaster claims, right? But only theft. So the example here circled is that, you know, for firearms, the example is the loss of theft is $2,500. So, you know, being aware of that. And then the other thing you may have is if you paid for a rider on your policy, You might have those additional coverages outside of the posted limits, like those examples on the State Farm policy, those, what did you call them? Coverage JK, I know I'm butchering it, JK or whatever, Selena.
Yeah, the option JF for jewelry and furs, and then your
Yeah.
option FA is your firearms. And HC is your option for home computers.
All right. And let's keep going here. And so these are, like I said, these are the items typically not covered, right? Unless they're scheduled. So animals, birds, fish are not covered. Recreational vehicles generally are not unless you've scheduled them. In a farmer's policy, it may say that they cover recreational vehicles, but not motor vehicles, and they're very clear in their definition. Designed principally for off-road use, only used on the resident premises. So, you know, you might have an ATV that's going around a farm, quote, but not for going out in the desert and joyriding, right?
One thing that's really important, Val, for policyholders to know is that if it serviced the property, and they'll want to remember those 3 words, serviced the property, it would be covered. Okay.
Yeah.
So if they had to take it out, they had a long lane to get to the mailbox, and they drove that ATV out every day to pick up the mail, that serviced the property.
Exactly. Yeah. Thank you. Right. And so this is just an example of our previous disaster survivor surveys, that just to give you an idea of how, you know, what it looks like, right? You know, so it's pretty much a 25-25-25 split. If insurers, you know, required a full listing or offer you, you know, less than policy limits in exchange for not doing an inventory. Sometimes they will pay you 100% of limits without requiring the policy, the inventory. And other times they're just going to allow you to do certain things like bundling books and clothes and linens and not listing everything by, you know, Selena, it might be 100, you know, the 100 books that are on the bottom shelf of your bookcase, you know, being able to bundle those in, but not having to list each of them individually. And then topic 2, options for completing your contents, your personal property claim. So obviously, and Julia will get you that link in the Q&A. You can ask for that waiver. You know, if you are required to prepare that detailed list, remember that you are going to be sending receipts as you replace items so that you capture that depreciated value. Or if you're going to hire professional help, just be aware that even with professional help, or if your insurance company offers you the services of someone to help you with it, it doesn't mean you're not doing the work. It just means somebody else is compiling the list for you, but you're still having to participate. And so, you know, when we're talking about doing it yourself, you know, it will walk you through that process a bit. So if you're hiring professional help, you know, just be aware that they're usually going to work for a percentage of your claim if you're hiring a public adjuster. And then, of course, they're going to, you know, handle most of the inventory process for you, but they're not going to do the work that it's the information only you know, right? Assigning ages, condition, information that only you are going to know. And Selena, I wanted to talk here briefly about how insurers may provide a template, but you're not obligated to or required to use it. But, you know, that information that they ask for might be important for the computer process or the system they're using on the back end. And so, you know, thinking specifically about your experience with those templates, you know, is there a lot of information there that really is not necessary, or does it all feed in?
It all feeds in, Val. And what people need to be aware of is when there's a glitch in the system, And that's a nice word for it, because when you list your items, not everything is average. You're going to have a lot of things maybe that's above average, especially if you didn't have any pets, if you didn't have any children in the home. So those above average conditions that you list on that Excel sheet, that template, then when you send it in to the carrier, and they import that into what they call the exact contents program, what we find is that every single time that imports, if you had, say, 1,000 line items and 200 of them were you listed as above average, there's not one that's going to come through as above average. It'll take new and it takes average. So this is a problem that I'm not quite sure who needs to deal with it and where we need to go to the insurance companies about it. But I know one in particular that it happens every single time. And that's very detrimental to the depreciation, because above average means there should be lesser depreciation on that. And that's not what is happening, unfortunately.
And just diving in a little deeper there. I mean, I know people who I bought it new, I had never opened it. It's new or like new, and it doesn't sound like that's going to carry you very far either, even though literally it was new, you know.
Right. So yeah, we all buy things and we might still leave the tags on it and it's in the closet. You've had it a year. And so if you put, I mean, if you're honest about it and you put, okay, well, that jacket that I bought was new, but it was a year old. If you listed it as new as condition, they're going to change it. They might put it to above average. Doubt it. They'll list it as average, and then it's going to depreciate it, more than what it should be. That's something that is negotiable, though. When it's all said and done and you get that back, a lot of the carriers, once they're done with it and they have went through that goes to the contents collaboration team, they do what they do with it, and because they have to justify prices, anything that's over $1,000, they will look, a lot of times they go to Amazon, and not that Amazon's a bad thing, because sometimes the prices are higher on Amazon, come to find out. So
Sorry.
once they make there we go, actual cash value payment.
Yeah,
Once they make that actual cash value payment, yeah.
Right. And then and we'll do a deeper dive on that depreciation and the correction in just a bit. And then just next slide here, what the insurer won't tell you. So if that supported contents loss exceeds that full policy replacement limit, when you total it up, you can ask that the claim be settled, resolved, and paid without the need to replace or submit those receipts. But like Selena just said, they're going to feed it into their system, and it most likely is going to be depreciated. So even if your list well exceeds your policy limit, when you get it back, it's probably not going to reflect that because of the depreciation. So it's worth the try, but I don't know that you're going to get it. And Mark, thanks for coming back. Sorry about your tech issue. And
Sorry about that.
Want to add here?
Yeah, thank you for bearing with me. I apologize. I got lost in my rant and didn't even know I was cut off. So please stop me if I'm repeating something that you all had said. But this actually ties back into Know Your Policy.
Yeah, let me go. I think this is where we were, right?
Oh, sure. Okay, and straight through. So this actually ties into the slide that you were on prior. I didn't know if you jumped or not, but it was truly one of the biggest takeaways with what the insurer won't tell you. When you went to the slide that you were actually just on.
Got it.
The extended replacement cost. If there is a carrier who does or is willing to send out that full payment for RC coverage because your actual replacement cost exceeds limits, again, trust but verify. Make sure that there's not an extended replacement cost. coverage that applies to coverage C. And am I repeating something that you all have already said?
No, that's actually perfect. And now I'm wishing I had a slide that pointed that out so people could see exactly what that is.
Something that we've seen more frequently is, it's called different things on different policies that we've seen, and there's extensions of coverage. We saw it a lot, Val, in California, right? Because of the wildfires and this demand surge. And I've seen it catch on more and more frequently, these extended replacement cost endorsements, again, called different things, that primarily extend coverage under coverage A dwelling. But more and more in my, anecdotal experience, I have seen some of them applying to coverage C as well, sometimes adding beyond the stated limits on your declarations page, another 25%, another 50% of not only coverage A, but coverage C for personal property. One that I actually saw this past week on a claim that came in, it actually increased the coverage C limit in proportion to how much of an increased coverage A was. So, if there was $500,000 stated coverage A, they had an extension up to 50%, and coverage A, actually got paid out at $600,000, a 20% increase. Coverage C was also increased to that same proportion. So, I'm not saying you need to be an expert in your policy. What I am saying and reiterating is the importance of getting a full copy of your policy with all endorsements, and at least taking a look at your endorsements. Even if they don't make sense on their own, have somebody else take a look. Have your neighbor take a look, have a professional take a look, so that you're not missing out on these claims. Because I have seen public adjusters, I have seen insurance company adjusters, be happy with a full payout, not realizing they're leaving money on the table because they just didn't read the policy. So I'll wrap up the the spiel there. Thank you again for letting me integrate right back in. And I'm going to keep my video off just because I think that might have been part of the problem. So thank you.
No problem. Thank you. So we're going to jump into our next topic, which is documenting and valuing your personal property. So, just to start, if they're insisting on that detailed inventory, again, you're going to gather, available records that you do have, any receipts that you can find, photos that document the condition, pre-wind water damage, to help build that complete and accurate list of everything that was damaged or destroyed, right? You want to trust but verify the valuations. And so you're going to get prices estimates from objective sources, and obviously fighting back if your adjuster tries to unfairly depreciate your property. Our contents, this is the link to go to our contents help. And then it's critically important to cooperate with your carrier in preparing the inventory. And so the key is just properly pricing and applying depreciation to the inventory. Being aware of, is the item properly priced? Is it, being accurate on the age and condition? Because if the more work you do up front, hopefully the less stress you have when that priced inventory comes back to you from the carrier, so that you can match it up. And then Selena, I know you had mentioned that, when you do get it back, just ask, you can ask for it, not just as a PDF, but as an Excel or CSV file, so that you can sort it and match it, right?
Right, absolutely. I would definitely request that they can do an Excel export, and they can send that to you, and it's already set up to where you can filter it. If you need some help, maybe kids, grandkids, or neighbors could help you go through that. But it's so much easier to use that than it is that payment tracker worksheet that they're going to send you, which you can't even blow it up big enough on your computer screen without it being distorted.
Yeah. And go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, if you don't mind, I'm going to jump in because that's such a great point that Selena makes, and oftentimes they do send it over as a PDF, and it's one button to press to get it to spit back out to Excel. We have seen carriers unwilling to send the Excel spreadsheet. Always ask for it, request it. It is that easy to actually do it. Worst case scenario, would also recommend, getting spend a couple bucks with Adobe if they are not willing to send it in Excel, and get something to, OCR, or make the document readable, at least with a control find on a PDF, if they're unwilling to send over that Excel spreadsheet, so you can easily sort, file, and manage that document a little bit easier.
Thank you.
That's a
And
good
so
point.
this is the example on the screen now is just where you can, some of the resources available on our website. We have several different example inventories from previous disaster survivors that you're welcome to look at and use as a base, but be aware, you can look at it and use it, but you need to submit an inventory that reflects what you had, your pricing, and where you would have shopped. So while it's a great jogger for memory, it's not going to take the place of you doing your own inventory. And so going back to this, you're going to start with your list. And so really, it can be room by room, topic, category, whatever works for you to fill in the inventory. If your carrier has not provided a blank spreadsheet for you, we have this one on our website that you can use. It's what we find is most common to carriers. And you can tool it around however you like. We encourage you not to do it all yourself. Use your family and friends to help you. They may have photos, they may just be able to remember things, and they just might be willing to help you with a room or a piece of it. If you know where you shop and you know the things you had, go to stores or shop online with that gift, using that gift registry function. And so, it gives you this is what I had. Obviously, you're still going to have to amend your inventory list to include when you would have purchased it, your best guesstimate. But it gives you something, and it also provides that replacement cost value. And just to be frank, it takes time to do this. So you're going to be adding to that list a lot. So keep a running list with you, pen, a notebook with you, a note in your smartphone. You can use shops that you have, stores that you've shopped at frequently, to see if they have records of purchases, because that will help you jar your memory of how old things might be, or where you bought it, or those types of things. And especially when everything is torn up out of the house, it's really hard to imagine what was in the living room, what was in the bedroom. And because right now you have a blank slate with mitigation being done. And so you want to think, visualize that room. You can record yourself talking, if you speak out loud, to have somebody taking notes, but just, imagine what would have been in there, because honestly, the post wind damage, flood damage photos are not very helpful. I mean, I'm sure you have them and you definitely want to submit them, but they're not helpful for, helping you build your list.
And Val, can I jump in for 1 second?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
I just want to add to the importance, because it's when I initially heard some of the ways to actually go back and recreate, and it's like, it's my stuff. I use it every day. I see it every day. Great. When I was actually moving within the city in San Francisco, so we had a tiny apartment at that point. Did not have a lot of things. We had a loss event occur, and we lost a majority of our personal property in that in that tiny event. I do this for a living. I had done contents and personal property inventories for a living, and we submitted a list after a couple weeks time, just trying to recall without using some of these techniques, and we ended up recovering some of these items that were lost. I missed at least 40% of the items. Take your time, do these actual exercises, because you don't really, if I missed 40% in a small 1 bedroom, and folks, you know, unfortunately, you know, have lost a portion of you know, lifetime worth of things, it's worth taking the time, even if you don't think it will help, to try, ask others, look for those photos, ask others for the photos, because you don't want to give away, you know, thousands, tens of thousands, potentially even hundreds of thousands of dollars, because you know, you didn't want to try visualizing. So I just want to reemphasize, I know anecdotal again, but please try it, do it. It's worth it. You'll thank yourself later.
And just to be frank, you know, most people have no idea how many clothes they have, you know, when you're looking at socks, shirts, things like that. It's amazing if you actually went and counted what you had in your drawers. So we consistently undercount. So, you know, do be aware of that. Now, some things obviously you don't want to count, you know, if you're a bookworm like me, you've got more books than you want to think about and you or admit to having. So estimating quantities is perfectly fine. If you had a built-in bookcase and you know you had water damage your bottom 2 shelves and it was full of books, you know, you can measure it, go to the bookstore, you know, pull out your measuring tape and say, okay, I had a 3-foot wide shelf. How many books fit in 3 square feet? You know, I had paperbacks and hardbacks, and you can do a mix and just borrow the shelves, the library, at a bookstore, and figure that out. And the same with clothes. You know, if you're close enough with your friend or your family member that they're okay with you going through their closet, you know, just see what it would have looked like. But giving yourself those rough estimates. And if you had specialty things, you know, a friend who with fabric, she was a quilter. Those things pack down very small. They're very heavy in the containers, but they're very small. So, you know, checking with either someone who has those things or a shop that has them will give you a better sense of how much you might have had. Because again, we know you're going to be under on your quantity estimation. Pricing,
Now,
go ahead.
now, can I insert something real quick on books?
Yeah. Mhm.
That's a big thing when you send your list in, because as an adjuster, you would get the list and it says books, $125 each. Don't do that. I'm telling you, you need to be more detailed. Not that you have to remember all of the names of the books by any means, but at least whether they were paperback, whether they were cookbooks, you know, if you had some hardback cookbooks and you had paperback cookbooks, list those as 2 separate line items, because they're different prices. And if you had 50 of, you know, some technical journals of some sort,
Yes.
break them down as much as you can, because it, not that the depreciation on books, people don't know it, but it's a flat 50%. It does not matter whether it's 1 year old or whether it's 50 years old. It's a flat 50%, which is very unfair. So that's one line item. That's one thing. Books, I would definitely want to negotiate with an adjuster. You know, if they were 5 years old and you very rarely used them. So.
And that's just such a great point, and such a utility of having United. If you're watching this webinar, you're already on the right steps. You know, just getting the insights from folks who have done it. You know, Selena and Val, because you know, even just mentioning the difference between knowing that there's a default line item and price for a soft cover book versus a hardcover book might not be information you get elsewhere. So learn those types of things, because if you're making the adjuster's job that much easier to pay your claim, they're that much more likely to justifiably pay that claim. So the difference between, like, you know, you mentioned cookbook versus, you know, fantasy type, like a genre might be different from hardcover versus softcover, but talk to folks, look at their list, see what line items look like they were default inserted, because if you're making that adjuster's job easier, you're going to hopefully make getting paid a little bit easier. So that was a great point, Selena.
Thank you. I think then going to pricing. So Included in the duties after a loss is listing the replacement cost of the damaged personal property. And so just a reminder, you don't want to be listing sale off-market discount pricing, because the reality is by the time you replace that item, that sale is going to be long gone. And then same with antiques and collectibles. Stay away from eBay. You want to look at resources that carry those items, like an antique shop. If you're dealing with antiques, just be aware of where you're sourcing your pricing. We've already mentioned the gift registry online. In my disaster, we had pricing parties, and somebody had the kitchen, somebody was doing the bathroom, and we were kind of pricing for everybody because we're like in this one little space and you could do it, and that worked out really well. And also just be aware when you're pricing, if it's artwork or items you have created yourself, even if you're a professional artist, they're only valued at the cost of the material you used. A different artist, fine, but your artwork, those items, it's only your materials. These are just a few resources that we've mentioned for pricing. If you've got things that are discontinued, Replacements Limited in North Carolina is a great resource. But you really can't beat the stores that you frequent, because they're going to have it. They're going to have current pricing. And if you've got that salesperson that has been selling you books for 20 years, they know what you like, and they probably can answer a lot of the questions that you have and give you that information in a much more useful form. And then after today's webinar, we will send, as part of a follow-up, we have a spreadsheet that has active links to pricing and description for common items in these spaces. So we had an intern put that together a couple of years ago. We update it every year with the hot links so that you've got that if you find it helpful. And then one thing, talking about the valuable collections, the things to be aware of, these are the characteristics of value, right? Status of the artist in the marketplace, type of work, medium, size, condition, rarity. Honestly, with these types of items, you might need an IRS qualified appraiser. And just flagging that as a consideration, because determining that actual value and what a replacement item would be is, unless you are a serious art person, it's probably outside of your expertise, right, Selena? All right, we're gonna take a deep breath here, and then Mark, I'm gonna turn it over to you to learn the lingo.
Go. I'm gonna make one more comment, Val, if you don't mind,
Yeah.
on collections. It goes back to step one, where I took my brief hiatus there with knowing your policy. Read the policy. Some policies you'll see there are sublimits or exclusions for certain types of collections that should otherwise be endorsed in another manner, right? And it is what it is, right? It's either a collection that falls under it or it's not. And the only reason I bring it up is not to say make the decision on what it is when you have a claim. Absolutely not. It is what it is going into the claim. You either have a baseball card collection or you don't, and there's either a sublimit or there isn't, right? But something actually that someone from the carrier side, told me recently as they were going through, and this was one of the good ones, right? Someone looking out for the policyholder who understood that the purpose of insurance was to insure. And they said, look out sometimes, because one of our appraisers told us, sometimes it's a collection, but sometimes it's an accumulation. And there might be a difference. And that might be something, worthwhile and, in the context of your policy. Is it a collection? Or is it an accumulation? Because I might have an accumulation of baseball cards where somebody else might have them in a different, they might have them saved differently. They might have them stored differently. They might have them valued differently, separately, prior to the loss, and that might actually be a collection versus the accumulation, which could have implications on how your claim is being handled. So again, just a side note, more of an FYI than a here's what you should do, but just be aware of these types of things now and going forward. So I'm sorry,
No,
take another deep breath.
That's perfect. We'll get to the breath in just a minute, but just to piggyback on what you said, while I have never ever been a collector of Pokemon cards, I have 3 children's accumulations of Pokemon cards in my house, that are very, very expensive to replace, but obviously not a collection that I have built. So that's a very good point. Thank you for bringing that out, Mark. And that's definitely something we will add. Now we're all going to take a deep breath. And let's jump on the next topic. And Mark, I will mute myself and I will be your Vanna and advance your slides.
Perfect. I'll try and make it a little bit longer than last time. So learn the lingo. Again, we're all at different places in the personal property endeavor at this point is the assumption I'm operating under. And you probably know more about insurance lingo than you did ever want to know at this point. Or you're not familiar at all with these terms. So we're going to run through a couple slides just to make sure you know the heavy hitters, and I'm going to try and not dwell too much on the nuance of them because UP, of course, always makes this information available, which is fantastic. Download it, print out a couple of these slides. Perhaps you have a 3-ring binder, print out a page with some of these shorthand definitions in there just to know as you go through your claim, because you very likely are going to experience coming across RCV, ACV, holdback depreciation, synonyms here as we go through. So can we go to the next slide, please? So replacement cost value, right? For most of us, again, that a policy for personal property is usually stated as a replacement cost value. The number that number you're chasing on the policy. Not all of us per policy, of course. Read the policy, read your own policy. Replacement cost is the price it would cost to actually repair or replace that damaged or destroyed item right now with the new item, right? I'll take a slight detour. We like to think of our insurance policy as a tool that puts us back to how we were exactly, a moment before the loss. That's not particularly the case for some types of policies. It is, the indemnity is really the next term we'll be talking about, and RCV has, perhaps a little bit of a different meaning. It's that price to replace, that item new. So, if you have those 5-year-old sneakers, what is the value of those sneakers? We'll talk about that in a second, versus what does it cost to replace those sneakers with a like, kind, and quality item.
Well, Mark, can I throw in, what if you purchased it at a thrift store or a garage sale?
Val, we talked about this earlier. Same thing with going through pricing on eBay, because that might be, that might be a sale or art that you acquired that gained value. You're looking to replace that item now, right? It's not, you can show me a receipt of what you bought it for previously. It might be more, it might be less, but what can you replace that item for now? Or at least a, like, kind, and quality. And, Selena had mentioned earlier, those things can be grouped together, similar types of items. It doesn't have to be, the exact ARC Microsoft mouse that I'm using now. That could, it could be a Logitech set that I go and replace it with. But RCV is the price that it would cost to actually repair or replace that damaged item now. So we can go on to ACV now, please. So ACV, on the other hand, is the actual cash value, the pre-loss value of the item. That price that a willing buyer would have paid you immediately before the loss. And I love that. I love the Craigslist price, right? The value of those 5-year-old sneakers worn. Sneakers are perhaps not the best example here, but perhaps my computer mouse is. Likely I wouldn't be able to sell it for what the market rate of a new mouse of the same model would be, but it still has value. As we discussed, read your policy. They're not commodities. They are all a little bit different. I shouldn't say they're all different. Don't assume 2 policies are the same is a better way to state that, because some policies do limit payouts to actual cash value, which is more, in my opinion, an indemnity measure. So the formula for most states, again, excuse me, I was coming from California. I'm now in Connecticut, where it's a little bit more readily defined that actual cash value is that replacement cost that we just spoke about minus depreciation. Some other states have different valuation methods for different types of property, whether that's real property or personal property. I don't want to confidently speak on a state that I'm not as familiar with, but that's a classic formula example that you'll see. The actual cash value is that replacement cost minus the depreciation, which makes sense. The new item's value minus the value it's lost due to wear and tear, and we'll talk about that in a second too. So next slide, please. An important concept that, again, please, if there's confusion on this portion, print out the PDF, go back, look at these sample policies, look at your own policies. ACV is oftentimes paid, and then replacement cost is paid when repairs are completed. The loss settlement provisions in your policy normally allow this to happen, right? The assumption would be I have replacement cost. I had those 5-year-old sneakers. Again, not the best example, but I'm too far deep now. I'm sticking with it. I had those 5-year-old sneakers. I found out that they were worth $50. Okay, I've submitted this information that are worth $50 today. Where's my $50? Most policies, when you go into them, you're able you read and you'll see that they owe you that actual cash value until you actually go and replace that item, furnish a receipt. And you'll see here, my screen's a little bit smaller, but I believe it's saying, the reasonable and necessary amount actually spent to repair or replace is what that's also going to actually be limited to. All right, let's keep going here. Thank you. Depreciation, I've been talking about it under the assumption that, of course, everybody knows what I'm talking about when I'm saying ACV is RC minus depreciation, but it is that loss in value of an item due to age and condition, wear and tear. The synonyms are important to know that we are talking about the same thing. At least in my experience, I've been talking about the same thing with holdback, withheld, recoverable depreciation, and non-recoverable depreciation being a topic I'm not going to dive into, but a similar concept of what they're actually discussing. Selena, what have you seen as the most popular term? Because I don't think I had experienced holdback until I had moved into another region. What term do you see most with depreciation equivalents or synonyms?
No, I've never heard with the carrier I worked for 7 years. I'd never heard holdback. We just always called it recoverable depreciation, and that's another. There's one more, and I might want to say people might want to make a sticky note and maybe write these down, because your adjuster is probably going to throw these at you at least once or twice every time you call them. So another one is your recoverable depreciation, which is actually RCBs. They call it RCBs, recoverable.
Replacement cost benefits.
So,
right.
Yeah, thank you. So that is the money that once you send in your receipt, then you're going to get the rest of your money. And we can talk a little bit more about that later. But yeah, as far as the terms holdback, everybody just calls it depreciation, recoverable depreciation.
Yeah, that's a good point. There are others that we can probably add 3 more to the list, which is a good point. And hitting the last bullet as well, we are seeing carriers contract out the valuation of your inventory. So verify their pricing reflects what you had. We're seeing a lot of third-party vendors, which can add a great deal of benefit to the claim, and it also, like anything else, right? Pros and cons. It's another step away from 2 people handling a claim, but they're also trained professionals that you hope are there to maximize efficiency. But again, trust but verify, and just realize that every layer of every extra step that your inventory has to go is another person with potential for errors. So just check. Be the conductor of your own train here. and again here, third-party valuation examples, you can see the depreciation that's being applied to some of these. I encourage you to take a closer look at the columns in that, in that Excel spreadsheet that you request from the carrier of your contents inventory. Take a look at the percentages assigned in depreciation. And I think we talk about that moving forward as well, but make sure that it's fair. You'll see here, Val has the cursor actually at some items that have 0% depreciation. And we'll talk about that a little bit more as well. Some items shouldn't be depreciated.
Well, and you can, and this is the what Selena and Mark were talking about earlier, where you're reviewing it when you get it back, you're making those corrections. You're not, if there's an error, you're catching it and you're sending it back.
One of the most important concepts in this, and this again goes back to insurance. Your insurance policy is a contract, and you're paying your premiums in exchange for something else, right? And just like any other contract that you enter into, you're bound by the terms, but there's flexibilities as well. But with the negotiation or with the contract, excuse me, in this back and forth, right? There are predetermined things in this insurance contract if a loss event happens, but depreciation isn't one of those things on a per item basis. Depreciation is negotiable. With the main takeaway being the more depreciation your insurer applies, the less money you collect up front, and the longer amount of time that goes by, the less likely it is you are to recover funds that you are owed. I haven't seen official standards or official depreciation schedules. I've seen insurers use some that are based strictly on age, and we're going to get into that a little bit more. But there isn't an officially adopted standard to point to. So you have room to bargain, you have room to push back, and you should, because it can be hard to actually get the information from an adjuster on how they actually calculated it. Challenge the numbers if they seem unfairly low. California, again, has had a robust insurance code. I'm less familiar with Florida's, but there's a lot going on in Florida. There are a lot of consumer protection, infrastructure in Florida as well. So please investigate it. If you don't know, maybe your neighbor does. Lean on United policyholders, lean on the other organizations that are down there, Merlin Law Group blog, plug in depreciation schedules or depreciation personal property in Florida, use the resources, find out what's going on down there, and be aware of items that shouldn't be depreciated, like we just alluded to. Oftentimes there will be a section that does actually spell out, antiques, fine art, jewelry won't be or shouldn't be depreciated. But the ellipses or the etc. at the end is important as well. Items that you wouldn't expect over time to lose value, if you don't think that they should be losing value or appreciating, even if they're not on this list, push back on those types of items. Something that isn't subject to wear and tear, something that isn't degrading. And then ask in writing, if you can get a copy of the depreciation schedule or methodology that they use. Selena or Val, have you had any luck getting those depreciation schedules if it wasn't from the software that you may have submitted it in?
The only thing I've seen that go ahead, Val.
Go ahead.
The only thing that I've seen that an adjuster would supply is just on State Farm letterhead. It says they use this certain from Exactware, and the bad thing is the reason this all comes into play is the program, that Exact Contents program that they use, it's left up to an individual who's doing data entry to put that category selector code on your 100-year-old antique. And if they don't use the correct category and selector code, it's going to take depreciation off of it. Okay. Same thing with the jewelry or your art. If they don't apply the correct code, it's going to mess the whole thing up. And it's going to apply more depreciation than it should. And that's why it's very important to get that document, that Excel export, so you can see for yourself and going into this that, hey, my 100-year-old antique, that should not have depreciation. So they need to fix it. So again, I know it's a lot of work, I'm not saying it's not. It's very daunting. It's a very daunting process, but this is your money. So you just need to be very cognizant of what they're doing.
Thank you. And I was going to say the only example I've seen is actually one. I think it's on. We have a link to it on our website from Hawaii. It's not something that's it's been common to be distributed. So it's worth it if you're finding errors to make the request, because you're making a point of you're making a lot of errors in the information I gave you, and it would help me to help you to know what you did, right? I don't know that you're going to get it, but it's definitely worth the attempt. And then Mark, the next slide is our favorite visual.
Yeah, for those of you who are not, able to learn, like I'm not a very good learner through audio and can't follow my rambling. This is the visual representation of replacement cost equaling actual cash value plus depreciation, or switch the variables around, then you can see why actual cash value equals replacement cost minus depreciation. Those will sum, and this is one of the more important things to understand as you're going through and collecting, the depreciation, the withheld, and understanding, where your dollars and cents are actually going, which is actually leads us right into replacement cost benefits and actually collecting that, I believe, from here. So yeah, again, if this helps, if you're more of a visual learner like myself, this is another thing that could be helpful to print out, slap it on the front of a binder, just remind yourself what you're actually looking at to move forward and negotiate on your own behalf.
Yeah, and with this example on the screen, just let's pretend your couch is $1,000, right? If you had a 20% depreciation, that means your ACV is $800. So they're going to pay you the $800 up front, and you're going to have $200 for when you replace it, right? Now let's flip it. If they've depreciated it 80%, they're only giving you $200, and you've got $800 to capture if you replace it. That difference in how heavily it's depreciated, that's just one item. Consider 2,000, 5,000 items on your inventory. That's a lot of money that you could potentially be leaving, on the table that you could capture without having to go and do all of that shopping. Because let's just face it, most people aren't going and doing that shopping for anything but basics until their home is repaired. All right, let's hop over to some common questions here, and I'd love for you both to weigh in on these. The first one is, I have a replacement cost policy. Why am I only getting the ACV? And I know we've already addressed this. Anything you'd like to add, either one of you?
One thing I would like to add, Val, is when you do go replace an item, and let's go to that $1,000 couch, and you were paid, let's say you were only paid $200 for it, you go and look for that same Bassett couch, they don't make it anymore. So now you've got to replace it with something else. If you replace it with something comparable, okay,
like kind of quality,
and say exactly, and now it costs $12.99, then people think, oh my goodness, well, I'm going to lose out. No, you send that receipt in and you tell your adjuster, this is like, kind, and quality. It is comparable to what I had. They don't make what I had anymore. And so now they owe you that extra $299 plus tax that you were out of pocket.
Got it. Let's see.
Yeah, I think I jumped the gun before on replacement cost versus actual cash value, but this just goes back. This is an example, and this looks like a State Farm policy. And I believe actually the next slide has the declarations page. And this is a California form. It does. Okay, so this is a California form, and I get that's not where we're at but again, every policy and in each state is going to look a little bit different. So this is a 7955, but State Farm here, you can see, Val, if you wouldn't mind backing up now for a second, they had the two options, right? They had it had a B1 versus a B2, and you look at your declarations page to see which provision actually applies, right? It's a little bit of a goose hunt, right? You want to see, okay, well, there are two different options here. You see B1 and it gives you, it lays everything out, right? They're going to, pay, ACV until repair replacement is completed. After replacement is actually completed, we will pay the difference between the cost to repair, replace, less depreciation, and the cost you've actually necessarily spent to repair, replace, or if it's not within 2 years. Read your policy, see which provisions in the body of the policy actually apply, and reference that declarations page, which could be choose your own tail type situation here, where you have to actually look at your declarations page. Is it a limited replacement cost loss settlement policy, or are they just paying you actual cash value? And while this example might not be what you're facing, I think it's just very important to realize that your policy might have something similar where there might be multiple provisions in there. So read it with a fine tooth comb there, or I butchered that saying, you know what I'm saying, or get a professional to actually do it.
And Mark, since I've hit the other slide, I want to go ahead and jump to the renter's policy. If you are a renter, it's just being aware of, and obviously this is a California example, but if it states ACV on a renter's policy, you're just looking to see if there's an endorsement that actually gave you replacement costs, because you could have added that.
Look for it, because again, a lot of policies, whether it's an HO for a homeowner's policy form, whether it's a renter's form, some of them might say actual cash value exactly, and then have it endorsed in somewhere else, either earlier, depending on what type of policy, or at the end of the policy, just depending on who the carrier is and what the structure actually looks like.
Got it. So now we're going to do more on depreciation. All right. So I will say, and I know Selena will emphasize this, if you're uncertain about an item's age, you need to put your best guesstimate, because as she mentioned earlier, leaving it blank and just putting in condition means that's going to be something you get questioned on, and it's basically going to be treated as a null entry until they have the information. So just being aware of that. And then this is just an example of that, as Mark was talking about earlier, that negotiation, right? So don't pay attention to the numbers items in here. You just want to see, this is what we're talking about, the process that you're going through, right? So that top part is the inventory that the consumer submitted. The bottom is the agreed upon scope and inventory from the insurer. It's what they're offering and how they've done that calculation. And then now, so you've submitted your list, you get their list back, and now you're looking at how do you collect that depreciation owed and withheld. And this illustration just gives you an example. It's a State Farm estimate. And so Mark, I know this is one that you helped create the slide, so I'm going to let you speak to this one.
Sure. This is an old one, and I should have made it a little bit less convoluted. The takeaway from this slide, I'll lead with the takeaway from this slide, is that, as it states on the bottom, as you're going through the process and as you have come to an agreement, right? The last slide that you'd gone through, Val, kind of showed the process of, okay, you've listed your items, you've assigned them an age, great. The carrier has then spit back that estimate that you hopefully get in Excel format that shows the depreciation amount. Now, this is kind of the next step, right? Now we're kind of talking about how do you get that difference, those depreciated dollars, if you have a replacement cost policy, because you've received the ACV funds. And that takeaway is that the amount of money that you are owed under most policies is going to be the lesser of the original cost, the cost to buy that item new, or the agreed upon replacement cost amount, right? So when you go shopping, folks call this agreed upon inventory list, different things, but for however long you are shopping for those personal property artifacts, again, to fill a home, that's going to be the most important thing that you carry around or the most important file you have on your desktop, because looking at the example, right? You're replacing a bath towel, something as simple as the bath towel here, right? And bear with me on the top of the screen here. The replacement cost that you came to an agreement on, because this is actually from one of the spreadsheets, these are the actual values. I should have made them round numbers, but it was $18.08. The insurance carrier depreciated that down and paid you up front $7.23. So you have that in hand with the remaining amount that you can recover, that you may be owed if you submit that receipt. The maximum, it's a ceiling, is $10.85. And similar for the Roomba, right? We're looking, because we're comparing these two. The replacement cost for that Roomba that you agreed to was $478.58. The actual cash value, great, they didn't depreciate it very much at all. It's $430.72. The remaining amount that you can recover is $47.86. Great. Okay, going back, we're going down below to this spreadsheet right underneath it. You're submitting a receipt. Either you're handing it off, they happen to hand it off to a public adjuster to assist in this process, or you are writing on that receipt what the item was. If this was said before, I am going to reiterate, slight tangent. While you're shopping and collecting receipts, if it's not clear what the item is, write it down, write it on the receipt. If you can match the line item, even better. If you can't, that's fine. Write down what it is. I believe that was probably said, but I want to reiterate there, because that helps this process, right? You have that receipt that just says a SKU number and it's for a bath towel and you had no idea. Anyway, back to the actual graphic, looking now at that $15.50 column there up top in that receipt example. That's the cost of the receipt that was actually on the item, and you went out and bought a Roomba for $499. Great, your receipts are labeled. We're looking at that bottom spreadsheet now. The takeaway again is that the amount that you can actually get back after submitting those receipts is capped at the lesser of that agreed upon replacement cost number or what you actually spent. So for that Roomba, even though you spent $499, you are only recovering that $47.86 that is capped out at the replacement cost value, the difference between the $478 and $430. This is probably difficult to follow right now. Look at the slide again, crunch the numbers on your own, because you also see for the towel that because the original cost was less than the replacement cost, the amount recoverable actually did not exceed, and it was $8.27 rather than the $10.85. So let me hand that back up, because I've rambled a little bit and I'm sure that there's a takeaway that someone else can actually help with there. If you don't mind helping me out around this rounding up.
I'm thinking Selena's example of if it's not, if you know, while this weighs in, if it's not, you're looking for like, kind, and quality because you're not able to replace that exactly, like with your Roomba example. If this is generation 1 and we're looking at generation 3 and that's all that's on the market, you might be able to get them to pay that agreed upon RCV. But just being aware that you are bound by the terms of the contract, that policy agreement you have. Selena, anything to add?
Well, just one thing is on that Roomba, let's say you went out to Target and you found one and it was on sale and it was $429.99 and you bought it. Now realize, because a lot of policyholders would go ahead and send their receipt in thinking they were going to get some money back, and there would be no more money to be had because they paid you the $430.72. So if you spent $429 when it was all said and done on the receipt, there's not any more money to be had. So there wouldn't be any sense in sending that receipt in. Don't waste your time.
Good point. Very good point.
That is an excellent point, because folks often, and yeah, thank you so much for bringing that up, because folks often say, oh, do I need to spend to the RC amount? And that is not necessarily the case to be better off. Perhaps if you want to capture the most, yes. But if you got, like you said, if you got the Roomba for $425 and the ACV was above that, you now have $5 to do something else with that you didn't have before, and you have that Roomba. So the mindset of I need to shop to the RC value is not necessarily true. You could be better off finding those deals. Just know, yeah, don't submit that receipt and expect to be paid on it. So yeah, thank you very much for bringing that up.
Well, and just to follow on that before we hop on the next slide, if you had a king size bed before and you wanted to replace with a queen, you know, you can do that within bounds, right? And if they paid you for, you know, your like new king, you just and your queen you purchased was under that price that you've already been paid out, Selena, then again, no need to submit the receipt. You've maxed out that item, right? In effect.
Right. Right. You know, and that brings up something else. Okay, well, what if you had that Roomba and you hated it, it didn't work right, and now you want to get an upright vacuum cleaner, you want to go get a Dyson, and it's, you know, say it's $600. Well, you can do that, but they're going to consider that an upgrade, and you'll still only get that $478.58 when you send in your receipt.
Got it. Thank
Does
you
that
for
make sense?
clarifying that. Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Because it's a flip of, if you had a queen and you wanted to go to the king, they only owe you for the full, you've replaced the item, but because of the upgrade, they're only going to pay you for the full value of the RCV value of the queen size bed. Got it. Thank you.
Right.
All right. And then let's wrap these few little points here up on depreciation. Obviously, age, condition, age is not everything. Condition can be more important. Again, if you don't know the item's age, list your best guesstimate. You can, you know, something may be in good to excellent condition. Just be aware that if you put excellent, new, like new, that does not mean that that's going to translate into what you would think as far as depreciation goes. We have said you can argue that depreciation should be based on the remaining life expectancy of an item, if it's something that should have lasted for a while. So, but Selena, do you want to talk about condition? Because people, when you get the list back, your inventory list back, sometimes it's very surprising to people to see what happened with the lists with those new items.
Yeah, thank you, Val. So if you send in an Excel, and they import it into the exact contents, be very careful and be very cognizant when you get that back, and you'll want to look at your conditions, because then you can mark my word, is anything you have average and new, it'll import like that. Your above average is going to change to average, and that's going to affect your depreciation. One that we just sent in, there was 701 line items, 222 of them was above average. So the depreciation on all of that should have only been like $13,000. They sent it back today, and everything was average or new, no above average, and the depreciation was over $23,000. $10,000 worth of difference. And if a policyholder sends that in and you're not paying attention and you don't look to see and confirm, there's so much money that you're leaving on the table. So just, again, I cannot stress enough, you need to review it when you get it back.
Excellent. Thank you for that. We're going to just look on that remaining life expectancy that I brought up. You know, but again, this is all going to be once you get your list back, then you're arguing against that excessive depreciation. And so this is the example of the couch. Here's our favorite visual. If your family is mine, that couch, doesn't matter how old it is, it's very, very depreciated. My grandmother's couch, impeccable shape. You know, it's
every time,
new.
Val. every
Yes.
single time reminds me of my grandmother's couch that's wrapped in plastic, and then my siblings were younger growing up. Yep.
But the insurance company, and until you get it back with the condition and age and that depreciation, you really don't have anything to argue with. All you've done is provided the details you can, and then you're having to correct it. And then Mark, just to talk about being aware of excessive depreciation.
Yeah,
And this is what the example is of the one that we have on our website, the link, sorry.
This kind of ties it, this what we've been discussing on this section, kind of ties the bow on top of it. Negotiate your depreciation and your ACV on a case by case, because the condition of each item in each home is going to be different. And both Valley and Selena were mentioning it. It's thousands of dollars, tens of thousands of dollars, potentially more in your pocket earlier on in the claim that you're owed. And there is a little bit of a trickle down effect there, because if you don't actually have the means up front to replace the items, and the clock is ticking on being able to recover, the additional monies that might be owed, you could put yourself in a really bad spot. So the importance of spending the time up front, look at depreciation guides like we were talking about before, compare, use them, realize that using them only goes so far as they apply to your own items. The same argument goes for you as it does for the carrier. They're unique in your situation. My family's couch growing up would have been more heavily depreciated. Look out for it, put in the work on the front end, and you'll thank yourself later. I know there's a ton going on. I know there are 100 other things that are more important, safety and health after an event like this. But if you have the time to do it, spend the time to do it. Use the claim resources and realize that your situation is unique, and play into it. Understand both sides.
Great, thank you. And we're going to do our wrap with our last section here before we do our ending slides. So topic 6, protecting yourself. And first and foremost, never intentionally claim items you did not have. You don't need to pad your claim to get a fair settlement. If you feel your adjuster is lowballing your pricing, don't inflate your value. That's where, as Selena said, you're going back, you're correcting it when you receive it back from them. So you submit your inventory, you get it back, you're doing that corrections, you're arguing against excessive depreciation. And to counteract the scare I might have just given you, innocent mistakes are very common on claim-related inventories. It's a lot of work, a lot of remembering. And these innocent mistakes, they do not constitute insurance fraud, but doing things deliberately is this intentional misrepresentation is a felony. Sorry, not a family, a felony. So you don't want to claim items you did not have. If it can jeopardize your entire claim, it can subject you to legal penalties. It's just going to create a lot of obstacles and delays and leave you open to risk. So please, please protect yourself in what you're doing. You want to be organized. As we've talked about earlier, saving all those receipts, scan them, photocopy them, email them. If you're buying things at a store, go ahead and have them email them to you. I suggest you set up a separate email account for your purchases so that it's not being mingled in your personal email, setting one up there so that you have a copy of everything there. You want to track all those claims communications like we mentioned earlier. You may need to set up a separate bank account when you're replacing items. So put the ACV money in your account, and as you replace, and that way you're able to track, because when you mingle it with your general money, it's easy to get very confused. And then we also have a CPA created a form for us to track your contents payments. So please take advantage of that at this download. Being strategic, you're unlikely to replace everything damaged or destroyed. So you want to maximize your ACV payments by arguing for lower depreciation, especially those big ticket items, and identifying that true replacement cost of items at standard and not discount retailers, right? Be politely assertive, right? You know, you have, your insurance company has cashed your premium payment checks in return for these three things. And your contract with your insurer entitles you to all three of these things: peace of mind, loss reimbursement, prompt claim service. And your rights under this contract are protected under the laws of your state. So by documenting, doing all of these things, you're positioning yourself to make sure that your rights are followed. Just some reminders for best practices for communication: get it in writing. If your communication with your adjuster is not in writing, putting in writing back to them, sending them that email. You want to keep it professional, be concise and to the point. Don't go on a 3-page rant about, with your frustrations and your emotions. Stay focused on what you need them to do. While they're, they are a professional doing the work, they're a person, and adjusters typically have way too many claims that they're assigned to work, and which is one of the reasons why you'll see the churn. So, be as respectful if this person as you want them to be respectful for you. And be mindful of what you say. It can be misinterpreted. So make sure you're very clear in what you're asking. And finally, just do what's best for you and your family. This process is really painful. Some people feel like they have to recover every dollar and replace everything they're owed. It becomes a mission. Others are just, I'm doing what I need to set myself up for success. And they understand they might be leaving money on the table. You really just have to choose the best path for you and your family, your finances, because this emotional aspect is just really emotionally draining. And so, just be aware of it and be kind to yourself. This is a lot to add on top of managing your repairs to your home. A few reminders, as Mark mentioned earlier, that insurance policy is a legal contract. There are laws on how it gets interpreted. As I just said, adjusters are human. They have varying levels of expertise and ethics and workload. This is a business negotiation. And remember, you paid for that coverage and good claim service. But be aware, if you need help getting a fair and full settlement, you might need to have professional help. Strong documentation is key. Having that claims journal where you jot down information is going to be very helpful. If you need professional help, on our website here, we have our professionals that we've worked with that might be helpful to you. I'm not going to read through these, but as Mark said earlier, Florida has statutes that help protect you. I'm going to these are on the PowerPoint that you can download from our website. So I'm just going to click through these, but we're not going to talk about them. I'm not an attorney and I don't want to represent anything here. If you need help from your Florida insurance agencies, these are the agencies that are there. If you if you're looking for local resources in your community to help you, these are the resources for the state. If you're needing help with basic needs, recovery, legal services, if you're low to moderate income and you need legal support, there are some resources there for you. Depending on what county you're in, there's case management in most of the counties impacted. This is the email and phone number to contact them for each of these counties. Obviously, a lot of counties were impacted. There are a lot of resources here. If you're looking for mental health resources, these are the 3 that are still available in the state. If you are stressed at all and need someone to help, we encourage you highly to reach out to these folks. For more general information, here's the 3 locations on our site to find things. We do have our Survivor to Survivor webinars, forums that we offer virtually if you'd like to participate in those. If you have a question, going back to those Florida statutes, you have a question and you'd like to get an expert's opinion on it. On our website, we have something called Ask an Expert. You can register, it's free. You can make your question private. And you sign in with your email address, it sets you up. And then when the answer is posted from your expert, you get an email telling you that it's been there, that it's posted, sorry. And then finally, just would like to thank our funders for our Hurricane Ian work, the Community Foundation of Sarasota County's Suncoast Disaster Fund and the Center for Disaster Philanthropy. Mark and Selena, I'd like to thank you for joining us. And do you have anything that you would like to add that either we didn't talk about, or you want to reiterate the importance of for folks?
Here's Selena after you.
Thank you, Mark. The only thing I would say is, again, just be very cognizant of what your insurance carrier returns to you. And if at all possible, get that Excel worksheet. And remember that you're not going to replace every single line item on there. So ask your adjuster if they will let you swap items. Stay in the same lane, furniture for furniture, linens for linens. But again, they should work with you. There's no reason why they can't do that. There's nothing in the policy that says they cannot.
Yeah, I just kind of reiterate and you hit the 10,000-foot view. Those are excellent takeaways. I want to say, thank you to UP, for all that you are doing on these disasters. I mean, the website itself is an endless hole of resources. Use it. Use the search. I don't think I've even come close to scratching the bottom. And I've been using their resources for years. Take advantage. I do have, the two parting thoughts that were hit on again, just to, you get more flies with honey than vinegar. That's the classic, realizing these are people at the end of the day, protecting your own interests, but also doing it as a human is going to go a lot farther, even if you disagree with how the claim has been handled, or the claim handling has been going great. Trust but verify, right? We're throwing a couple of the adages in. I would be remiss. I should have thrown you a slide on this, Val, and I did duck out during the policy portion, but I'd be remiss if I didn't actually bring it up before we go. Look at your policy as well. Most policies have them, and unfortunately, some adjusters do miss this. And this goes hand in hand with just the chronic underinsurance problem that is out there and has been out there over the past couple of years. Debris removal coverage is huge. You very well may have debris removal in an extra 5% of your policy per applicable coverage. So if you're someone who is exhausting those limits, like we said, gets that full payout under your policy for your contents coverage because you're in an unfortunate position where you were underinsured, look to your policy, make sure your adjuster is granting you that 5% for debris removal for the debris removal of contents. Don't leave that 5% on the table, because again, that you have $300,000 in coverage. That's $15,000 extra dollars that we absolutely understand and know you could use and you have been paying for. So with that, I just again want to say thank you. I've learned a lot being on tonight, Val and Selena. So thank you, and good luck to everybody moving forward.
All right. Thank you both. Thank you, Ben and Amy, for being our tech support in the back end, and wish you all a good evening.
Good night.